in the 50s and probably early 60s too, there was a definite park culture. You know, I didn't have a television until I was 14. I used to play outside all the time, and the family would always just, let's go to the park. People didn't have the disposable income they have now, and also they didn't have distractions like, you know, computer games and all this. So it was the park.
As a child, you didn't have holidays of such. The money wasn't there, and you didn't. And remember, I was born right in the middle of the war. So there was a very big austerity thing after that. My holidays were going hop picking into Kent. So as trees came into it and being with me with that, of association of being on holiday in a different way.
My memories of Ruskin Park are purely those between 1927 and 1939, when the war broke out and I didn't live in that area again. To me, of course, it was an enormous area. When you're a child, these places are like that. I mean, it was absolutely vast, half the size of Wales, as they say.
I started coming probably when my daughter was something between 10 or 11 days to maybe 1.5 weeks old. I'd found myself moved from Croydon to the mother and baby home in Hernhill Road. And the first thing I wanted to do, because I like to be outside anyway, was to, I really didn't know what else to do with a baby, was to put her in this huge Silver Cross old-fashioned pram and just bring her out walking. That was a kind of typical September, kind of rather rainy day, but it was fantastic to come out here.
As a child, I suppose I was about 12, senior school, and they used to have dances around the bandstand. And I think it was either a Tuesday or a Thursday, so I used to rush my homework, get my homework done, and my mum taught me at a very early age how to dance. So it was sheer pleasure being able to come here and dance around the bandstand, and I did that for quite some time, really. Of course, girls dance with girls then, and, you know, it's also different to how it is now.
My father and I and my brother's 7 years older than I am, we used to go running there from when I was about 6 until the age of 11. When I ran in the mornings in the park, the person, to my delight, I used to see quite a lot, was one of the most famous athletes in the world at the time, and that was the great Sidney Wooderson. I used to see him in the morning because he was training, and I used to think that I was training too. So I used to go back to my schoolmates at Caldecott Road and say, I was running with Sidney Wooderson this morning. The fact that he was one side of the park and I was the other was neither here nor there.
We lived in a block of flats called Ruskin Park House, which was just up Champion Hill, and I was less than a minute away. So on my own at the age of 7, I would dash, because you always run at that age, dash out of the flats, down Champion Hill, past the bubonic playground, the Triangle, which is now a car park for the Fox on the Hill pub, and I would just dash across the road, which is a nightmare, really, when you think about it. You're a young child.
Someone at the mother and baby home told me about 1 o'clock clubs, and I thought, you know, what's this? It was like a totally strange phenomenon, you know, what's this club? And that was quite a huge social, it's quite a very big social thing. You know, we got cheap tea and biscuits, which was nice. There were all these exciting toys. I think one might have been something you crawl through. Can't remember, but they'd be all out. And I remember the Weeping Willow as well.
I also remember park keepers. Wow. They were in their brown uniforms. Nobody would backchat a park keeper. Nobody would backchat a park keeper. You wouldn't swing on trees or anything like that because you'd probably get a clip round the ear, actually.
The big field that is where you've got the Redgar pitch for the football, my brothers played on there. And I can remember climbing up and going down over the funny little bars that are at the back and swinging on them to get into it, but also getting very gravelly knees because it's horrible surface.
Between 7 to about 13, I just loved the park for its beauty. You know, you make a relationship with it like you do with people, really, especially when you're a child. I just adored the park for all sorts of different reasons on a number of different levels. But as I got older and, you know, hormones change, you get into boys, there were a number of little places where you could sit and either wait for boys or look for boys or sit with boys.
I have very, very strong memories of the paddling pool, you know, in the summer evenings. It was just wonderful, but it felt very democratic, you know, you didn't have to be smartly dressed, I certainly wasn't, you know, you could be casual and it didn't matter what you did or didn't do or if you had money or not, you know, it's just like people with their children enjoying the water and the summer, and that was really very nice.
There's a very famous designer called J.J. Sexby, Colonel Sexby, who was the Metropolitan Board of Works in the 1890s. But it's quite nice the way he laid it out, that he had to work with the houses and the old layout of the gardens, so he's actually integrated them into the park, and that's quite quirky, and people often like that. You know, go with what you've got rather than try and scrap it and then start from scratch. So that's been a big success. That's something I like, is the fact you've got nature right next to heritage and next to people.
And the children's playground was my own, just my playground almost. And there was always a lady in charge, a rather large, rather wide lady with a brown felt hat and a brown uniform. And I think she had a few sidekicks, but there'd always be someone there in charge. You go through this little gate and there would be, I'm always back there at this precise moment, riding the horse. This lovely horse, I think it was a long metal horse, and the best places on this horse were at the front. If you couldn't get the front, then you got the back. If you got the middle, you were slightly shortchanged. And there was a slide, and we were queuing for the slide, and there was a roundabout, and there were swings for babies, and there were these big swings for the big people, like me. And I remember that behind, separating the railway from a lot of the park, were these beautiful Lombardy poplars, and the big swings, as we called them, were right near the Lombardy poplars, and I would swing as high as I could to try and touch the Lombardy poplars. Again, I think, oh, crumbs, you know.
My children learnt to ride their bikes over there, but they loved going over there in the autumn when you had all the leaves falling and kicking up all the leaves and collecting all the conkers, because conker games were still then allowed. I think the children must have been about 11, and they'd wanted these walkie-talkies, and I said, don't take them over there. They took them over there. So what happened? A bigger boy stole one of them. But that doesn't change. It's it was a lesson learnt by them as well.
People like to keep their park secret. They like to have, it's my secret park, it's my personal park. So what they like to do is, like, they don't want the place to become hammered with lots of people. You see it in other parks and green spaces like Clapham Common, Brockwell Park, Streatham Common in Lambeth, where you make it too popular and people start saying, oh, it's too popular. But you have to try and realise that parks are provided by the council for everybody, and you can't have a privilege to have it to yourself. So as parks become better and safer, you will get more people. And sometimes that can be a conflict with local users. But you have to realise those local users are going to grow up, retire, maybe pass away. So you've got to bring a new audience through.
Living in flats, which were very noisy and obviously a lot of congested people, wasn't very nice, but it was home. Coming here to play hockey was like living in the country. And I can always remember thinking, when I'm grown up, my one wish would be able to live here. Not knowing that I would be able to spend all these years here.
My husband, while he was ill and walking through the park all the time, it was a great solace to me that I was then allowed to put his ashes in the park. So, and a tree. And a tree.
But it was also a place where I felt people were quite supportive, and I did have this real sense of kind of acceptance. I remember once thinking I was almost happy because I'd been quite unhappy at the time, but it was actually in the park, walking through, feeling close to my daughter, nature, everything. I thought, gosh, I could almost be perfectly happy.